Namaste. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shal Gulhati, Shiva and Mysticism for another episode of Monday with Mahadev. Today, I'm going to speak to you about a term which I'm very fond of myself, and that term is science fiction. Well, we've all heard of science and we know what is fiction, but how come this genre of this fantastic fusion between science and fiction comes about? And we have some of the very best films on TV and Netflix about science fiction, and some very good books about this as well. So, before I give you my little take on science fiction and how science fiction is connected to Mahadev, I would like to read out a passage from my first book, The Yogi and the Snake, for all of you, which was written about 35 years back. And even at that time, I was probably fascinated by the confluence of science and spirituality. And there is this particular passage where Shiva talks about the scientists and the spiritualists and how they were actually joint in their missions. So, this passage is called About Time. In fact, the mystic and the scientist were always brothers, looking for solutions to common limitations. One went within and the other without. But in their journeys, they drifted too far apart from each other, and the mystic remained a mystic and the scientist remained a scientist. Now, the time has come when they must share the fruits of their wisdom as brothers should. The modern mystic is already using the travel technology available to go across the continents. He takes jumbo jets and flies across the continent, and this he does because of his brother, the scientist. The jumbo jet is the invention of the scientist. Mystics are supposed to do astral travel. There is no need for him to deprive himself of the scientist's latest developments. So, also, the scientist should no longer deprive himself of the inner bliss, spiritual devotion, and cosmic understanding known to the mystic. For the scientist knows rational. He has a term, irrational. But the mystic knows beyond rational. The scientist knows how to move with time. The mystic sees beyond time. The mystic had discovered that even with regard to the cosmos, space is not the final frontier. Light is not the ultimate speed. It is time we should learn to traverse. The mystic has so far been a discoverer. The scientist is largely an inventor. So, while the scientist is yet working commendably to invent a craft that shall make outer space travel common. And please remember that this book is 35 years old, and now, as I am talking to you about this, we do have outer space travel being made available to public by Elon Musk and his company. So, while the scientist is yet working commendably to invent a craft that shall make outer space travel common, he cannot discover a rational way to invent the time machine. Because at that time, 35 years ago, we did not have outer space travel common for people, only astronauts could do it. And therefore, we were very far from trying to invent a time machine. Whereas the mystic knows he is the time machine. You see, the mystic knows that time machines need not be made necessarily. That may be a scientific way of doing it, but in dhyana and meditation that they can do time travel as well. There can be a great future with spiritual scientists and scientific spiritualists, said the yogi, for God is both. God is not only spiritual, he's a scientist too. He's a spiritual scientist or a scientific spiritualist. Now, with this background, when we come back to science fiction, science is a word which we use for the things that we have discovered and established. So we have laws, scientific laws, Newton's laws, we have laws of gravity, we have laws of floating. But fiction is something which we think does not exist because we do not know it as yet. When the two come together, we have science fiction. How do we understand this genre? How do we understand this coming together of science, that which is established, that which we know, and fiction, that which we do not know, which is impossible, irrational? Well, if we have fixed laws which we have discovered, like gravity, like God wanted Newton to discover gravity. So one day, they say that when he was sitting under an apple tree, an apple fell on his head. Well, surely God wanted Newton to realize the law of gravity. And the same was with Archimedes, who had the principle of floating. They say that he was in a bathtub and leisurely thinking about science, and he slipped into the bathtub and then immediately came up buoyant, and he made those laws. So when we have established science, it's like a music notation which we have. There is an equation, we know it, like I spoke to you last time, and then from there we can discover or explore fiction. What is fiction to us today can be the science of tomorrow. So if, for example, we know with science that there is a particular law that light can travel at this speed and something can travel slower or faster, and if we travel this much time at this much speed, this is where we will reach, and if we can travel faster than that, then we will sort of beat time. And this part of science will then give rise to what we call fiction. Is time travel possible? If we know the scientific laws which God has made us discover, and scientists have worked hard on them, then combining that with our imagination, and I spoke to you about imagination last time also, when we combine science with imagination, we get science fiction, which is what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to build tomorrow? How are we going to travel tomorrow? What are the limits where human intelligence can take us when we continue discovering science? And that is when we realize that many of these things have already been written in our Shastras. For example, scientists talk about parallel universe or multiverse today. They're very excited about it. But in our Shastras, we already have it. It is called Indrajal, the great web, the great net of Lord Indra, the king of the Devtas. And when we talk of time travel again and again, well, we must never forget that Shiva is Mahadev, he is Mahakal, the ultimate time traveler. He is the one who creates time, so yes, he can traverse it at any given time. So when we do that with a rational science behind us, then we start creating science fiction. I hope you liked this video. Join me again next Monday, and I will be back with yet another Shiva wisdom for you. Om Namah Shivaya.